Welcome to Feed Your Wild, an immersive journey to help you remember your own medicine and awaken your intuitive healing gifts. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join us for heart-centered, real conversations exploring intuition and spirituality, health and wellness, astrology, herbalism, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and life. Our mission is to inspire, empower you, and help you expand your spiritual and intuitive connection to its fullest expression so that we can build a more beautiful world together. Get ready to feed all parts of your wild self. Welcome back to the Feed Your Wild podcast. I'm your host and intuitive nourishment guide, Vanessa Rodriguez. I'm really excited to dive into today's episode and topic. This is something that I had not planned on doing. This feels very meta because today we're talking about intuitive channeling. And how I came to this topic and this episode was that I was doing my own channeling. I have a practice of intuitive channeling that I do. I utilize the Akashic records, and I use them for a lot of different things, very practical things, such as planning with business and editorial calendar and program creation, and yes, with podcast episode ideas. And I wasn't asking for a podcast episode idea. I was holding the prayer to create something because I wanted to create a class and anything else that might be supportive for the collective and for the people that I am here to serve. And what came through super loud and clear was that I was to teach a masterclass on intuitive channeling and that I would create a podcast episode to lead up to it. So I was given this assignment, if you will. Of course, we can always choose to say yes or no. And I received this message not too long ago. So if you can imagine having a sort of preset editorial calendar and things on the calendar already, and then having this message and this impulse, really. So that's one thing that I also want to talk about in terms of discernment later on in this episode, is when you receive messages, how do you know which ones are the ones that are most true for you? Which ones are the pieces of information and insights that are most helpful, that you can apply, that you can say yes to? And I have honed in my discernment muscle with the information that I receive. And so for me, it shows up in a lot of different ways. One of which is sort of this expansive feeling in my body and my heart, a knowing through clear cognizance, a knowing that this is the truth, and almost like a feeling as though it's already done. Like it's already done at some point in time. And we'll talk about non-linearity and as it relates to consciousness and channeling. But we can tap into certain things that are on our so-called timeline that have already been done, but in the future. So we got to think quantumly, right? We're moving beyond the time-space continuum. And they have a certain quality and essence when they are most resonant with the path that you're on, the highest path, when you hold an intention in prayer to call something in. There is a certain level of knowing that you can embody. And this is all part of the magic of manifestation and channeling. So I had received this message, and then I was called to pull some cards on this. I utilize tarot very regularly as a divinatory tool, as a supportive tool, an ally. It's absolutely an ally in my spiritual toolkit. I've been using it since the beginning of my own spiritual awakening process, developed a really beautiful relationship with it. And so that's one of the tools that I like to use. And when I connect in with guides and my own guides, my teaching spirits, helpers, my highest self, I often work with cards, tarot cards or oracle cards. And I was told by myself, my high self, to pull some cards. And one of the cards, the first card that came through when I was asking about this topic of intuitive channeling, was none other than the Magician. I'll share why this is really on point and the significance of this later in the episode. But what I also love about this is in this particular time where the veils are thinning, we are moving deeper into October, and we have many different traditions around the world where we connect in with ancestors, for example, Samhain, Diwali, Halloween, and Dia de los Muertos. So there are practices throughout the world that honor this time and this otherworldly feeling in the air as the veils between dimensions become thin. Interestingly, I also received notice. I am on a certain email list, and I received notice of particular gene keys and human design elements that are happening on a week-by-week basis, just sort of informing what's going on in the cosmos, so to speak. And this week of October 9th through the October 14th, so the week that this particular episode is published, is the week of the intuitive. The intuitive as the archetype that is transiting through this week. You could say the pulse of the collective heart right now is beating to the rhythm of the intuitive. This archetype's energy moves from, if you're familiar with gene keys, there are 3 different layers or qualities of a particular key. And there's the shadow side or aspect of it. There is the gift, and there is the city. And the city is sort of like the exalted highest expression of this particular gene key. So this archetype's energy moves from unease. So feeling that uneasiness, unease in one's life, unease in your body, unease with yourself, to clarity, which is the gift of clarity, and moves into the pathway of intuition. So some keywords here connected to the intuitive are attunement, clairaudience, and gentleness. And I loved this because it was like, well, of course, there was a little bit of pressure for me to get this out this week. In particular, there definitely is this collective impulse. So it doesn't matter when you are actually listening to this. You could be listening to this far in the future, but there is a certain signature through the birth of this particular episode during this specific week and holding those codes of the intuitive. And I just love how these synchronicities really come together and happen and make themselves known. And as you do this work, and by this work, I mean with a capital W, your soul work, your spiritual work, you open up your own and awaken to your own intuitive channeling abilities, then this becomes more of the norm, where you have synchronicities happening all the time. You have a consciousness that is beyond what you can touch, feel, see, sense in the material realm. And you are plugged into a greater awareness of all that is, that can inform your lived experience and the choices you make. So I just wanted to share that little bit of behind the scenes of the creation of this particular episode and how that unfolded, because it just felt super meta. It essentially came through in an intuitive channeling. And so here we are. What I love about the intuitive archetype as well is that this is about experiencing true knowing. True knowing. And the intuitive can perceive something before any of the senses can, the five senses that we most typically talk about. And intuitive awareness is through the body as well. So primal instincts here, there's an acute attunement to movement, vibration, to sound. There is an alertness, awareness of the physical, mental, emotional, and psychic environments. The element connected with the intuitive archetype is the wind, which is so often connected to spirit. The intuitive picks up vibrations and through the wind, through her aura, her energy field and body, and translates them through her brain. So, of course, this is intuitive channeling, and I am here to demystify intuitive channeling and to normalize intuitive channeling, because we need to for survival, in my humble opinion. But it's about remembering who we really are. And I have a special message from our collective guides of the podcast. I channeled in an Akashic Soul Nourishment reading for this particular episode. It seemed appropriate, and I was also told to do so. So if you are new to this podcast, I have done many, many different intuitive readings on the podcast for the collective field. So for those of you who are tuned in and listening to the podcast, these are called Akashic Soul Nourishment readings. And I open up the Akashic records of the podcast and the collective for those whose souls are allowing for this information to come through, and channel in specific messages and readings that our guides and highest selves would love for us to receive. I will be sharing that reading at the end of this episode, so stay tuned. I also wanted to share, I had prefaced that in the creation of this episode, it really stemmed from this assignment that I was given to teach a class on intuitive channeling. So I am doing just that. It is a free live masterclass that I'm holding on October 24th. Now, of course, if you're listening to this and it is past October 24th, I'm going to make it available for you so that if you register, you get access to the replay. So even if you are not going to be able to make it live or it is past the date, go ahead and grab your spot, register so that you get access to the recording, the replay. The masterclass is called 3 Keys to Unlock Your Intuitive Channeling Gifts with Clarity and Confidence. And yes, even if you're feeling disconnected or just starting out. I'm gearing this masterclass for healing artists, for practitioners, for those that aspire to be in service in some sort of healership capacity. Contrary to popular belief, we all have intuitive channeling abilities. And you just have to know what they are and how to connect and work with them in the highest and best way. But where do you even begin? And how do you know you're not just making this stuff up? So here's the deal. You don't have to be a highly trained psychic to unlock game-changing intuitive channeling gifts. You just don't. In fact, most ancient healing practices were based on intuition. So I'm here to demystify it. In my masterclass, I'm going to be revealing the intuitive channeling practices and strategies that have produced the best and fastest results in my healing practice and, of course, my personal life, so that you can replicate them in yours. I'm going to be sharing my AAA process for mastering the art of intuitive healing, really leading to mind-blowing accuracy with your readings and happy clients. Of course, we want that. The 3 most common mistakes that sabotage your intuition and how to avoid them. And my go-to spiritual tool that you can use with any healing work to amplify your intuition and results. And this works for healers of all types: nurses, therapists, doctors, coaches, nutritionists, energy healers, acupuncturists, herbalists, you name it. I'm also going to share how I was able to expand my healing practice, really grow it at an exponential rate, and connect with my dream clients. And I'm telling you, I fall in love with them. They're amazing. And I'm actually going to have a few of them on the podcast very soon. So you're going to hear from real people that I've worked with who are just incredible. I'm so excited for you to meet them. This work with connecting with my intuitive channel has really allowed me to create a body of work that feeds my soul and makes an impact while working less than I ever have. And of course, if this is an intuitive channeling masterclass, there's got to be some intuitive transmission going on. So to make sure that you are fully equipped to receive this information and to take it and run with that and get the best results that you can following this masterclass, I'll be sharing an intuitive transmission to activate your channeling codes when you join me. I'll make sure to have some time for Q&A with the masterclass. And at the end, I'll briefly mention about my 9-month practitioner mastermind and mentorship, the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. Applications are soon going to open up, and I'll share a bit at the end of our masterclass. It's going to be really exciting, and you can join us by clicking the link in the show notes or going to wildlyrooted.com/channeling. And I will see you there. Okay, so let's come back to the basics with this episode. What is intuitive channeling? Most people, when they hear this, think of trance channeling. So this is where a person allows an entity, a supposed entity, so this could be a deceased spirit, angels, higher self, etc., to use their body as a vehicle to communicate. While this is obviously a form of channeling, it is one very specific type of channeling. All humans channel the life force that is available to us, that we are made up of all the time. And we're always connected to our higher selves and all levels of consciousness. So we have the ability to channel these things, consciously or not, which is essentially traveling non-locally across time and space. Everything is interconnected. I love this definition given by Helene Wabe, who is the director of research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. She wrote an amazing book I highly recommend called The Science of Channeling. And she is a channel herself, in addition to researcher and practitioner. She's a naturopathic doctor. And she says channeling is the process of revealing information and energy not limited by our conventional notions of space and time that can appear receptive or expressive. Doesn't sound very woo-woo, does it? So this is about non-local consciousness experiences. And non-locality is sort of a term that's brought in through quantum physics. But we see in wisdom traditions throughout the world, channeling was a key part of communing with the divine, of understanding our world. So there are many different ways to relate to and view what channeling really is. My rough and very short definition is that it is the art of communing with divine energy. We often think about conversations in our own mind, voices that we might hear, inner voice, connecting to our inner voice. This is all part of this phenomenon of channeling. We become an instrument, and not just for yourself, but for energies and other forms of subtle vibrations that are available to come through. There are many ways to channel. It's a very natural process, and we are literally doing it all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. We channel in inspiration and words for a book or a poem or a blog. We do so in the creation of art, music, and song. We do channeling through the making of things, especially for those with the gift of touch and working and creating with your hands. And cooking is a beautiful example of that. There's also energetic channeling. So many body workers and dancers and birthers, anybody who's literally given birth, you are a huge channel in that moment. So when you're channeling, it may not come in as a voice. And, there's a lot of misconception when you start talking about channeling. Very often we feel like, oh, well, I can't channel, or that's not me, or I don't have those proclivities or gifts. And I just want to say that I invite you to suspend some of those reactive thoughts and beliefs that come up. I think they're really important pieces of information. So it's not about banishing them. It's about welcoming all of the things that are coming up as I'm talking about this topic, but just noticing them through, that compassionate witness consciousness, setting it aside, maybe taking note to like, oh, isn't that interesting? This feeling is coming up, or this belief is coming up, or this thought is coming up around this topic. And that is beautiful material for you to work with when you begin to lean into your own intuitive channeling gifts. So in essence, we're basically tapping into something that we are all a part of. Where does that inspiration come from? Where does that insight get downloaded from? We could call it consciousness. And consciousness is seen as fundamental, information-driven, and we co-create it collectively. So you can imagine a consciousness, a field of consciousness that we are all plugged into and we're all contributing to. This is actually something that is anchored in studies. These are demonstrated and supported by cosmology, quantum physics, and lab experiments. Unconscious channeling drives your everyday choices and reality. There is a model of understanding this called the psi-mediated instrumental response, the PMIR, and this is a model for channeling experiences that happen spontaneously. You receive information unconsciously, relevant to what you need, and then you use it unconsciously. So this model says that we use channeling without any conscious effort or awareness. Now, this brings me back to the magician archetype that came through in our tarot card pool on this topic. The magician in tarot is about being a vessel that brings something in from unseen realms, from the ethers, through our vessel. So we are the bridge. It's ruled by Mercury. Mercury in the alchemical model itself is exactly this. It's the bridge between the different states and different levels of consciousness. So as the magician, the faucet is turned on and something wants or desires to move through you. This is also about communication. So Mercury connected to Gemini and Virgo. These are connected to the nervous system, the gut brain, communication, travel, movement, things that we make with our hands. It's where the soul and the body, the vehicle, meet. The magician is also the manifester. The manifester knows how to use their vessel and use their mind to create their reality. So the magician is not only a channeler, but also a manifester. And this all is connected to the same nature of reality, this non-local consciousness, and this idea that we co-create this consciousness and thereby co-creating our reality, with or without conscious effort or awareness. So, having said that, wouldn't it be nice if we can actually bring some awareness and some intentionality and will to this magic work of channeling and manifesting? There's a long recorded history of channeling. It's been recorded throughout history. We see trans-channeling with oracles, prophecies, spirit possession, recorded in multiple cultures worldwide for over 3,000 years in all religions. Channeling of gods and goddesses in most recorded religions, including Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. You have channeled messages that are the central foundations of the teachings. We see the Oracle of Delphi in the Greek lineage that smelled fumes from the temple grounds to induce a trance state. We see Moses, who received the 10 Commandments channeled in from God. We see the rishis in the Vedic tradition, mystics throughout the world, initiates like Socrates and Plato, who were said to also channel in information. We see this, of course, in indigenous groups across the globe and spiritist groups in Brazil, spiritualists in Europe. We see in Candomblé and Ubanda, people interact with and embody spirit agents who carry important information. And this information helps in assisting with information for the community, diagnosing illnesses, prescribing cures. We see this in a lot of different cultures throughout the world. And at some point, particularly in Europe, channeling was demonized and was considered witchcraft. This is in medieval Europe. We all know about the horrific witch hunts and the witch wound that so many of us carry from those times, and also moments like that. So it may not have been in that particular time of medieval Europe, but perhaps you have memories of this happening at some point in your own lineage or a set of lifetimes. We have record of channelers throughout history, famous channelers and types of channelers. Some that have been documented include Joan of Arc, a peasant girl living in medieval France, who believed that God had chosen her to lead France to victory in its long-running war with England. And so, with no military training, Joan convinced the embattled crown prince, Prince Charles, to allow her to lead a French army to the besieged city of Orléans, where they achieved momentous victory over the English and their French allies. She, of course, was captured, tried for witchcraft and heresy, and burned at the stake at the tender age of 19. She was officially canonized and had long been considered one of history's greatest saints. It's recorded that at the age of 13, Joan began to hear voices, and she determined that she had been sent by God, who had given her a mission to save France by expelling its enemies. So Joan was clairaudient, clearly, and she heard voices. She also had trance-like experiences. How was she able to convince the prince, you may have asked? Well, it's said in a private audience at his castle, Joan of Arc was able to convince him by supposedly revealing information that only a messenger from God could know. The details of that conversation are unknown, but clearly he trusted her enough, was convinced to allow this young, less than 19-year-old girl to lead an army. One of the world's oldest religions, Hinduism, is almost entirely based on insights revealed to the rishis, wise men with clairaudient and other mystical gifts. Now, in the dark side of things, it is also documented that Hitler could hear a voice and was a channel. He labeled this voice the voice and attributed it to divine providence. And apparently the voice saved his life many times, and once in the trenches, and this was documented by someone who knew Hitler. This same voice had spoken to him when he was only 17. It told him that he would become the savior of Germany. You can look more into that story if that intrigues you in the book called The Mind and God of Adolf Hitler. So clearly, channeling absolutely has and continues to have major impact and implications on Earth, on our real lived experience, in politics, in society. And it does in all aspects of your life. I have to share one more example of a story of a channel that has actually come into collective awareness in more recent times, and that is the Swedish painter Hilma af Klint. She was credited, after her death, of course, she died in 1944, as an important pioneer of abstract art. But her work wasn't seen by the public until 1986, even though her work was completed years before Kandinsky and other abstract artists who are given the title of like the world's first abstract artists. She had stipulated that her work not be shown for at least 20 years after her death. She was a spiritual medium, and she attributed the origins of her painting to channeled spirits. She practiced with a group of spiritualists, and they held regular seances. They were collectively known as the Five. That was their title. And they would engage in this method of automatism, or automatic drawing, in an attempt to capture messages from spirit. So this is a form of trance channeling. This automatic drawing or painting involves giving conscious control of your hand in order to channel whatever's wanting to come through in the mystical realm and the spirits that are channeling through. She created an incredible body of work, and she called this project The Paintings for the Temple. It was 193 works completed that were based on the automatic drawings that she had done during the seances. One of the most remarkable things about this, I mean, aside from her astounding work, which is just beautiful, the temple that she refers to in the title was this fictitious cylindrical temple that she had imagined displaying her work. It was a tower made of alabaster with an internal spiral staircase along which the visitors could go up. While that never manifested in her lifetime because she didn't want her work to be seen until 20 years after her death, it manifested over 100 years later in 2018 at the Guggenheim, New York's famous spiral-shaped art museum that fits her description of the temple. One thing that most people aren't aware of is that she was also a theosophist and an anthroposophist. So anthroposophy connected to Rudolf Steiner, who I'll be talking about actually in the masterclass. Rudolf Steiner was a mystic, psychic, researcher, scientist, philosopher, architect. It's like polymath. Clearly, what didn't he do? But he was the one responsible for developing biodynamic agriculture and Waldorf education, among other things. He would give lectures, tour the world and give lectures, staying in Europe mostly. And in 1910, Rudolf Steiner was lecturing in Stockholm. And Hilma af Klint invited him to see her paintings because he was an initiate, and she had hoped that he would be able to interpret her work because as she had channeled it, she didn't have full grasp or understanding of what it was that she was channeling and creating. She wrote in her notebook, "I have once again personally appealed to Dr. Steiner to find out about the work, whether it should be preserved or whether it should be destroyed. The answer was that it would be detrimental to let it disappear and that it could be used and useful." So it's unclear whether Rudolf Steiner told her to wait explicitly or she herself had decided to wait. but the rest is history, as they say. Interestingly, during the same years that Hilma af Klint was creating her paintings for the temple, Pamela Coleman Smith was designing her iconic illustrations for the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. And that is the tarot deck that basically established tarot and the iconic archetypes that we still utilize today. Channeling has not only contributed to religion, politics, art, as I demonstrated here, but also to health and concepts that we now would put under the umbrella of New Age. Edgar Cayce is one of the most famous channelers and psychics of our more modern time. He was known as America's sleeping prophet. He would go into a trance-channel state. He worked with the Akashic Records, and he assisted many, many, many people on health issues, bringing in remedies, supporting them in their life, and really created an entire library of information based off of his channelings. Now, he received a lot of criticism for his work, and we see this throughout history as well, is that there's always skepticism and criticism and vilification and even violence, as we saw with the witch hunts. So, of course, there is a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of confusion and mixed feelings when it comes to something like intuitive channeling. And it's important to honor that when that comes up for yourself and to really interrogate it lovingly, right? Ask where that's coming from. And is that true for you? Is it something that you feel is holding you back? This fear, this judgment, this confusion? And how can you support yourself in connecting to your own gifts in a way that feels rooted and safe and natural? Other famous channelers that I'll mention briefly just by name: Jane Roberts, Esther Hicks, of course, with Abraham Hicks, Carla Ruckert, Judith Scotch, Bashar, Seth, Barbara Masinik, people who are channeling various types of entities, group entities, supposed galactic beings, angelic beings, ascended masters, and more. Using your intuition and intuitive channeling faculties is also a really good business move. And it's been shown how iconic entrepreneurs use their intuition to get to where they are. Entrepreneurs like Richard Branson or Steve Jobs or Oprah Winfrey all have claimed that they rely on their intuition to make decisions. Steve Jobs had said, "Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary." We also see contributions to science, of course, with Einstein and Nikola Tesla. I could go on and on and on and on. My point is that intuitive channeling is not only our nature, but it's also necessary for creating reality, for co-creating our reality and our lived experience here. It's part of the point of being here on Earth. I mentioned a few different types of channelings and clairs, and I kind of just want to give a quick overview of those. If you're like, wait, so like, how do I even begin to receive or perceive when I am channeling in a conscious way? Because obviously we demonstrated that we're all doing it unconsciously all the time. How do we bring conscious awareness? It's by understanding the forms of communication, the different types and ways that we receive and perceive. So I'll start with the clairs. These are intuitive channels. Psychic abilities or clairsenses allow us to connect and communicate on a much deeper level. And there are many different clair gifts, Everybody has natural intuitive abilities, and it varies person to person. So here are some of the primary clairs, and I invite you to connect in to see which might be the strongest for you or which you identify with the most. The most commonly known, I would say, is clairvoyance. And clairvoyance is also a term that's used, I think, interchangeably with psychic in general, just sort of this generalized term. But clairvoyance actually means clear sense of vision. So psychic sight. This can be inner sight, so you see things in your mind's eye, so to speak, or you have external clairvoyance, meaning you can actually see things that other people can't, like auras or spirits. There's clairaudience. So this is clear sense of hearing, being able to detect psychic information through your ears, through a voice. Claircognizance. This is clear sense of knowing, psychic insight. You just know things. There's clairsentience. This is a clear sense of feeling. So detecting psychic information through your body. This could be like maybe all of a sudden you feel a tweak in your back, kind of like this pain on the upper shoulder, and you're with somebody who is experiencing that. So you are feeling that in your own body. Clairempathy is a clear sense of emotional feeling. So I think most people are very familiar with this one of empaths or empathy, and I'm assuming that many of the listeners here are empaths. You're able to detect that psychic information through your emotions. So you might feel the feelings of others and receive information through feeling as well. There's also clairs that utilize the different senses that we're more familiar with. For example, clairgustance, which is sense of taste. Like you all of a sudden start tasting something, but it's psychically coming through. Clairalience, which is a sense of smell. So you might start to smell certain scents. And this is very common, especially for mediums, smelling the cologne or the perfume of a dead loved one. Clairtangency is clear sense of touch, so receiving information through your hands. And this is another tool that many mediums use. They'll take an item from a deceased loved one and hold it to receive information. You can also perceive energy of places and land. That's called geomancy, or have an empathy with nature and for nature. So there's nature empathy and really connecting deeply with nature. Animal communication also would fall under that. There's precognition, which is future telling, receiving information about something that's going to happen in the future, or retrocognition, receiving information about something that occurred in the past. There's many different terms. I'm not going to bring them all in here. There's hundreds of them, and many of them are interchangeable. There's no clear reference for how to use these specifically. But I hope that gives you a little bit of a scope and tuning into how you receive information. Perhaps you don't receive it during the day, but you receive it during the night in dream time. My dad does this. He is what I call a practical dream psychic. He literally dreams about things that are going to happen, but like having to do with maintenance in the house. For example, he dreamt that there was going to be a leak in the 3rd floor bathroom, and he was shown how to fix it, and then it happened the next day. He also resolves a lot of problems in his dreams. He's very engineer-minded, and so that's how things come to him. We see in how historical cultures and in indigenous lifeways, dream time was honored as something that was a really critical aspect of communion with divine knowledge and wisdom and information, and that we needed to take that information and bring it to our waking consciousness in our lives and utilize it. We can also utilize tools to assist us with intuitive channeling. So some aids and tools would include divinatory tools. I had mentioned tarot, of course, with cards, oracle cards of any kind. Runes are an ancient divinatory tool. There's also scrying, and scrying is essentially a deep communion through the eyes with a particular medium or element. So fire scrying, candle scrying would be staring at the flame of a candle, but coming into a deep, almost meditative state through that process. You can also scry with water and various other materials. We see the Oracle of Delphi and other oracles utilizing vapors, so smelling in the vapors that alter the state of consciousness. And of course, there are also various plant medicines and drugs that also facilitate the shift in consciousness. So the process of connecting intentionally as an intuitive channel, it's really about shifting your consciousness. We can measure that, if you want to measure it, by looking at brainwave frequencies. So moving from beta, which is kind of like everyday life, active brainwave, to alpha and theta states. And there are many different ways that you can help facilitate that shift. There's a really lovely practice that I learned about from Max Deshu. She is a historian and teacher and author. I had her on the podcast. I'll make sure to link her up. She writes about a practice called utisette, literally meaning out sitting. This is practicing this ancient way of connecting with the elements, the universe and spirits at night. And that it was very common for women in particular to go out and sit out on the land especially during a full moon, and gaze in nature. Now, this incorporates a lot of the different things that I touched on, right? Nature and gazing, the scrying, communion, empathy, opening up, and dream time. And it's also free. It's something that is very natural. What's interesting is that the women were banned from utisette for evoking natural spirits for the sake of gaining knowledge. That is what has been written, that they were literally stopped, banned from doing this and evoking the natural spirits that they were doing, that they were connecting with, because it led to the gain of knowledge. So now coming back around to the efforts of certain groups to hide this knowledge, this wisdom, to vilify and demonize these practices. There were very real agendas. And a big part of it was to disempower the people, especially Native peoples, Indigenous peoples, and women, but really to disconnect people from their innate, natural, and divine connection. What better way to control a population than to do that? So this movement, I'll call it, to reconnect with our intuitive channels is an act of reclamation. It's a revolutionary act. Will this help support you in your personal life? Absolutely. Will this help you in your healing practice or business life if you have those? 1,000%. Will this help you in your own spiritual evolution and growth? Yep. And above all, this work contributes to our collective evolution together and the healing of our collective, including Mother Earth. So this is really big stuff. And I take it very seriously, and I invite you to do the same and to say yes to claiming your own intuitive channeling gifts because they are divinely yours. In my masterclass, I'll be sharing a little bit more about my own story, my personal experience with intuitive channeling, the evolution of that in my own life, the various ways that I channel, how channeling has and continues to support my life and my work. And I'm also going to be weaving in various examples and case studies too, so you can be inspired to connect with your own gifts. I'm going to be covering a ton in the masterclass. I mentioned a few of the items in the beginning of this episode that I'll be sharing, but it really is my intention to have you walk away feeling empowered and like you have the tools to begin to work with your intuitive channeling gifts in the highest way for you. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to move into our short Akashic Soul Nourishment reading for this episode on intuitive channeling. You are sense beings, and as sense beings, you are meant to sense with all of your senses, far more than the 5 you typically relate to in mundane life. Like a river under the influence of the cosmos and yet still informed by the local environment, shaped by the container, the movement, the flow. Currents. There are always currents running through. This is well demonstrated by the meridians that can be measured, as the so-called science of your time seeks to have. The currents are made with various types of energy, culminating in a plasmic field that leads to a perceived signal or expression. A bear in the woods stops in its tracks, fur arisen, precognition. A doe turns the other way, hearing the cry of its mother's heart miles away. The birds and the bees move in unison, avoiding disruptive currents in flight. The whale receives the cry of humanity and holds the messages of our great ancestors as living, breathing capsules of wisdom. Coral spawn in unison across the globe. These are the natural ways of being in all life forms, microcurrents to macrocurrents. The human body is unique in its design to hold particular charges, impulses, and frequencies, designed to pulsate and emanate light, imperceptible to most physical eyes. Yet for many, certain senses beyond the 5 are heightened, available to the subtle spectrums immeasurable with available tools. You are your best tool. The brain is a receiver, translator, and transmitter. The pineal transmutes information between spectrums of frequencies. The heart vortex, when attuned properly, conducts and spiritualizes what is denser in energy to a subtle, refined form, which serves as nourishment for the soul and the spiritual world. This occurs through the sacred process of purification and personal spiritual evolution. This is all part of what you might call the ascension process. It is about utilizing your innate faculties designed for evolution and movement through your will. You can swim upstream or downstream. It is your choice. For the past century, access to the subtle realms of consciousness have increased to the many, whereas before it was reserved for initiates and those with the gift, as they called it. While you have always been channels in a variety of senses since the dawn of human, this spiritual communing with subtle realms at will, consciously, has grown over time. This is why the doors to the Akashic records have been opened and many different lineages and pathways provided. There is much needed to be spoken, shared from the unseen realms, from your loved ones, helpers, beings of light and divine love. And humanity is starved for this level of connection and support. It is time. It is time to open up to all that is available to you, to assist you in this challenging, complex material reality called Earth life. It is time to remember your true essence and nature as an intuitive channel. And that completes our reading for today. I hoped that what I've shared in this episode is supportive for you in your journey. And I love to hear reflections and ahas. Over on Instagram, I'm at Wildly Rooted, or by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Blessings and be well.